Byrds are generally regarded as one of those hard luck outfits of the mid-60s R&B boom, a fine band that never got the breaks that they so richly deserved. They're also well known, not for their music, but for two other entirely different reasons. Firstly, they were the group that gave us Ronnie Wood, he of the Faces and Rolling Stones fame. Secondly, they shared a name with an American band of considerable prominence, a band that electrified Bob Dylan, popularised the Rickenbacker guitar along with George Harrison, and almost single-handedly invented the musical genres folk rock and country rock. They are, of course, the Byrds, with a Y. But as for the British version of the Byrds, with an I, their total recorded output consisted of fewer than a dozen songs. But any band that boasts Ron Wood as a founder member is worthy of notice, if only from an historic point of view. It was hardly surprising that young Ronnie should be interested in music, as both of his older brothers were keen musicians, with the middle sibling, Arthur Art Wood, being heavily involved in the early 60s R&B scene. Art secured a stint as vocalist of Blues Incorporated, probably the most influential British rhythm and blues band around at that time. Musicians such as Dick Hextall Smith, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, Danny Thompson and Charlie Watts all passed through Blues Incorporated at one time or another, and with group leader Alexis Corner encouraging a communal spirit at their Ealing Club performances, many other aspiring musicians such as Mitch Mitchell, Long John Baldry, Brian Jones, Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, Paul Jones, Rod Stewart and Mick Jagger were all given the opportunity to sit in on the band's gigs.
The interval, where they'd take a break, he would invite anybody up to fill in the gap, for 10 or 15 minutes. And one night he invited Nick and me, which is the first time he played with Charlie Watts.
Alexis Corner, you're the father of English blues. How did that start?
I suppose it started by virtue of the fact that I was the oldest cat around who was prepared to say that was what he was playing.
Having rubbed shoulders with such musical luminaries, Art's input seems to have been undermined somewhat by the exemplary satellite talent that revolved around the band. But perhaps this is hardly surprising under the circumstances. Younger brother Ronnie's enthusiasm for music eventually resulted, in 1964, in the formation of a band of his own that consisted of local mates, most of which lived within a block of each other. Tony Munro and Kim Gardner lived just down the street from the Wood family home in Useley in Middlesex. And along with another local lad, Ali Mackenzie, they formed the Thunderbirds, named after the Chuck Berry song Jaguar and Thunderbird. Wood reminisced about the early days in his best-selling book, Ronnie. We played Motown, Bo Diddley, the Beach Boys and Jimmy Reed all in the one set. Would rehearse in whoever's garage was free and jam until we were moved on. Eventually we got another rehearsal venue when a really polite old gentleman who ran the Rainbow Record store next to the Nag's Head said we could rehearse in his shop window. Anyone who walked past that shop got a free gig from us, he said. They started playing a local hostelry called The Nest, which was probably nothing more than a community centre, but as word spread, they built up a serious following. Wood and Gardner were even given the opportunity to back travelling American blues pianist Memphis Slim at a venue called the Ivy League Club, Slim having arrived in the UK without a backing band. The pioneering blues pianist caught the Byrds at either their regular Friday or Saturday night Nest gig, and even though Wood admits that he didn't know who Slim was at the time, he was observant enough to notice that he played piano real sweet. They did not earn any money from this experience, Slim paying the young whippersnappers with a bottle of whiskey and a big hug. The Thunderbirds acquired a manager, albeit an extremely dodgy one called Leo de Klerk, a South African businessman who turned out to be a wide boy from East London and a part-time actor. If nothing else, de Klerk did succeed in introducing the band to some new venues, mostly clubs that he apparently owned, and they started to play regular gigs at places like Hounslow, Windsor and Reading. The proverbial name change occurred round about this time when Chris Farlow's backing band, also called the Thunderbirds, decided, in time-honoured tradition, to reclaim what they thought was rightfully theirs. Wood claims that Farlow's entourage got angry when they discovered that someone had pinched their moniker, but added poignantly, "I took that to be a good sign because it meant someone had heard of us." Wood's Thunderbirds duly became the Birds, and manager de Klerk instantly put them on the road, whilst drawing up the proverbial "sign here and I will rip you off mercilessly without you realising it" contract, which the band and their parents innocently added their signatures to. They toured the UK in a beaten-up old van, paying their dues, as so many other groups had done before and since. Life on the road was certainly not glamorous, whilst the pay, between £5 and £10 a week, was exceptionally poor, but de Klerk finally got the Birds a residency at the 100 Club in Soho, where their mixture of hard, edgy RnB got themselves noticed still further. Wood and the boys befriended Bo Diddley, backing him on a number of occasions when the Mississippi Gunslinger was in town, whilst bigger and better gigs arrived, culminating with an appearance at the Glad Rag Ball with the Kinks, the Who and the Hollies, all of whom were established recording artists at the time. Getting their own recording contract was the next logical move, though there appears to be some uncertainty as to how this was obtained. The Birds certainly took part in the then popular TV show Ready Steady Go's Ready Steady Win Beat Group competition, and it would appear that it was their performances on this programme that secured them a deal with Decca Records. But Wood seems to think that it was a demo recorded at the tiny Tony Pike studio in Putney that got them noticed, with their Beat competition appearance occurring after the band had released a couple of singles. This seems unlikely, however, as one of Ready Steady Win's rules was that competitors were not allowed to be contracted to a record label. Whatever the true order of events may have been, the Birds didn't win the coveted TV prize, but they did release their first single in November 1964, a Ron Wood original entitled "You're on My Mind," which Wood admits was based on the Yardbirds' "There's a Certain Girl."
And talking about my first band, the Birds, my friend Kim Gardner and I, he used to live around the corner, we formed the Birds, and I wrote my first song called "You're on My Mind." It's quite a trip down memory lane because we cut it in a little recording studio, Tony Pike Studios in Putney, and we had to do, we did 4 tracks in one day with the Birds from start to finish. And "You're on My Mind" was one. "Leaving Here" was the A-side, which is Eddie Holland, Dozier and Holland song, Motown. And then we did another song, "How Can It Be," which is another one, self-penned, the second song I ever wrote. And that was the B-side of a Marvin Gaye song, and "No Good Without You, Baby." Beautiful song. Haven't heard it before or since, but the Birds did cut it.
"You're on My Mind" didn't chart, but the follow-up, "Leaving Here," originally an Eddie and Brian Holland Motown creation, reached number 45, and at this point it seemed as if it was only a matter of time before the big breakthrough. Enter the band with the Rickenbackers. In the spring of 1965, the Birds' debut single, "Mr. Tambourine Man," was released on the newly established CBS Records label and was burning up the British charts, whilst "Leaving Here" by the Birds was indeed left there, all over record store shelves up and down the UK. That summer, the American Imposters toured England for the first time, and de Klerk, sensing an opportunity, decided to take legal action. The idea was that as those damn Yankees were invading Bird territory by visiting UK soil, he would issue a writ upon their arrival at Heathrow Airport, suggesting that the band change their identity. He eventually issued 7 writs in total. It was a bold but subsequently futile gesture. The spellings were different, and both groups' claim to the name were equally good. De Klerk never stood a chance, though one imagines that he probably knew this all along. Wood admits that the scam provided the band with some publicity, even to the extent of appearing on the front cover of the leading music publication Melody Maker.
The Thunderbirds, oh, that's what we were before the Birds, because Chris Farlow had the Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
The same as the legal battle our manager got us into with the American
Birds, yeah.
He sued them for stealing our name. Because we had a big name at the time. Yeah, there's a figure here saying, here's the birds, fly into legal flat. And only a couple of years ago, I bumped into Jim McGuinn when they had their first hit, and they came to England with Mr. Tambourine Man. They got off the plane, and good old Leo, our manager, served them as soon as they set foot on English soil with a writ to say, you've stolen the bird's name. But we did get on the front page of the Melody Maker, which meant a hell of a lot back in 1965, I tell you. And Jim McGuinn, I reminded him, I said, do you remember when you first came to England? And he said, yeah. He said, I remember there was some illegal stuff thrown right in our face. And I said, you know who that was? And there was a long silence. And he said, it was you, you bastard. There it is again.
But despite this, the Byrds could not get a hit. The ultimate irony is that the Byrds' UK tour fell apart when several band members were taken ill. And in the wake of this, Wood & Co. appeared on both The Millicent Martin Show and Thank Your Lucky Stars. A third Decca single, a bird's eye view of the rare Marvin Gaye song No Good Without You Baby, appeared in late 1965, but it was to be their last single with Decca, and also the last single released with manager de Klerk at the helm. After being booked to play a 1965 New Year's Eve show at the Starlight Ballroom in Sudbury, de Klerk failed to show up. When the band went to pick up the takings at the end of the concert, they were astonished to discover that they'd been given £1,000 for the performance, most of which would have ended up in their manager's pocket. After de Klerk had been given the push, Robert Stigwood, the larger-than-life Australian impresario, signed them and instantly moved the band to Reaction Records. Stigwood wanted this to be a fresh start in more ways than one, and decided for some inexplicable reason to rename the band Byrds Birds, though no one quite understood why. They recorded a cover of Say Those Magic Words, an American hit for the McCoys, but its release was delayed for almost a year due to a contractual dispute, and when it finally came out, no one seemed to care about the band anymore, least of all the record-buying public. They cut a version of Pete Townshend's Run Run Run, which inexplicably remained unreleased, and made a delightfully bizarre film appearance in an instantly forgettable horror movie called The Deadly Bees, performing a Ron Wood Tony Monroe song, That's All I Need, which was also never issued. But time was about to run out for the band.
We gotta understand it alright. That can only be found inside. It means that you love me, I love you. And nobody else would do, 'cause that's all that I love you for.
Wood's persona as a likeable geezer meant that he was now rubbing shoulders with some heavyweight British musicians, and with Ron spending more time in such exalted company, this unsurprisingly made him tire of the Byrds' almost non-existent career. One memorable session that took place in 1965 practically mapped out Ron Wood's future. He was asked to play bass guitar on a Mick Jagger-produced session for P.P. Arnold and Rod Stewart that also featured Keith Richards on guitar, and either Keith Emerson or Nicky Hopkins on keyboards. Wood, however, was not the first person to leave the band, Tony Monroe claiming that distinction, though Ron followed soon afterwards in 1967 to join the Jeff Beck Group. Of the original band members, only Kim Gardner also successfully maintained a musical career, who joined Mod Gods The Creation before becoming a founder member of Ashton Gardner and Dyke in the late 60s.
Thank you, the Byrds. I'm sure we all wish them the very best on their forthcoming tour of America.
I hope you have enjoyed my potted history of one of the 60s more obscure but nonetheless culturally significant bands. Please subscribe for more.